Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Hey, Slate, what's going on?
Hi, how are you?
Great. Really excited to have you back on again for the part two, right? The long-awaited part two. First episode of WNBA Wednesdays. Really get to kind of showcase all the great things happening in women's sports. And so excited, right? When I thought of like who should I have as this first guest, like I was like, wait, duh, like it's a pretty obvious answer. Let me hit up Jay Slate again. So thank you so much for coming on the show. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really glad to be back, and of course, always talk about the WNBA.
So if we can maybe get us started with maybe what being a woman in sports means to you both, like maybe right in your field specifically.
I think to me, it really just confirms that in any industry, you can always find a space for yourself, whether you're female, whether, whatever your circumstances are, I think you can find a space for yourself somewhere if that's what you want and you want it bad enough. I don't think it's always going to be easy, but to me, it really means a lot to me that I was able to carve out my own identity in sports and to really start to make an impact so early on and in so many different areas of sports that it's really probably the main thing that I'm most proud of.
It's huge. And I remember the last time you came on the show, we were talking a lot about maybe some of the experiences you've had in the industry, right? We kind of maybe centered it all around reporting and all that stuff. Maybe how much of that has kind of been grounded around the women's game and how much have you kind of seen that evolve?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my big first opportunities was an intern for the Texas women's basketball team. And they kind of gave me my first opportunity to see how high level sports were working and be behind the scenes, all the different moving pieces, and that, it's not as simple as it looks. There is a lot going on, and to really understand the structure of being in a team outside of, being on the athlete side. And so I think because of that, I really learned quickly, and with such a good example of women's sports, that this was something I wanted to continue to do, and that I wanted to be a part of that culture.
So important. And I mean, it kind of brings us back. What are the biggest things you're doing now, obviously, with the Slate House? I want to hear about, right now you're kind of getting into that entrepreneur space. What can you kind of tell us what that's been like and explain what the Slate House is?
Yeah, so I won't lie to you. I definitely didn't have the business savvy, mind going into it. I don't really know much about business, but again, reached out, found the contacts and the network that could help me piece that together. So I started the Slate House to do like digital media, brand management for athletes, for teams, events, just kind of on a concierge basis. So trying to be, as helpful and authentic for whoever I'm working with, and give them the opportunity to really showcase their stories or their ideas, whatever it may be, in the most genuine way possible, so that it really reflects them and not just, another cookie cutter idea that, we're just kind of pushing out, where I really want to make sure that it reflects them and that they're really happy with it first and foremost.
That's so huge, and make sure that all happens. I'm curious, maybe, what kind of obstacles did you face, right, building your own brand in that sense? I'm sure, right, it wasn't easy. You didn't wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to start this company, right? There must have been so much leading up to that.
Honestly, there's a lot less leading up to it than I think I should have done. I just kind of got to the point where I was like, I know what I bring to the table. I know my skills. I know that, I have somewhat of a network and a reputation for, being hardworking and being in sports that, I can kind of rely on, but it's definitely not the backbone of it. I think it's going to be something I'm going to have to continue to work on. But for me, it was about getting the foundation of the business set up so that, all of my I's are dotted, my T's are crossed, so that when I do go in to work with people, all of that stuff is taken care of. The invoicing and all that stuff is real easy. And then I just really knew that what I wanted to do was going to really rely on how I like to help people and my approach to it, and being really athlete forward or team forward, whatever that may be, and keeping that at the forefront. And it all kind of just fell together after that. But, it hasn't been that long, and there's going to be a lot of, roads ahead where I have to keep pushing through, finding more clients. And then the other big thing is it's not really something that exists. So there's definitely marketing agencies. There's creatives that you can hire for videography or for graphics and stuff. And I'm kind of covering all of that, as well as outsourcing when necessary. I don't claim to be able to do everything. So, building that Rolodex of really good photographers and videographers that I can set up for workout photo shoots and stuff like that, different projects. But, really trying to get all of that organized, I think has been, something to work on as well.
Outsourcing, delegating, those are super important skills. But I think you're selling yourself short a little bit because you do have so many skills in this industry, right? And our listeners, if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and listen to it because they'll obviously hear the breakdown of all this stuff. But can you kind of give us a little bit of a recap of maybe what all, because there's so many of them and there's so many different roles you had leading up to where you are now. What were some of those skills you picked up that have been, I would imagine, invaluable to you?
Yeah, I mean, been through kind of it all. So I went to school for journalism. So the general writing, PR, all that kind of stuff, media training is there. And then I've done play-by-play, I've done videography for news, sports, I've done graphic design, social media management. What else? I don't even know. I think at some point I've probably touched everything a little bit, did some sideline reporting. And so I think those give me really good perspectives on how to work with other people, what type of things I can ask of photographers so that I'm not, asking them for too much or things that just aren't possible. And also like deadlines. I know not to like ask for a video to be edited within like 2 hours. Like there's realistic expectations because I've been in that position and I know how to edit videos. So I think that's kind of the biggest advantage of the skills is not necessarily knowing how to do all of them, but it helps me be a better team player.
So definitely so important to have that background. I'm just curious because being a woman in sports, there's unfortunately all those trolls on the internet that are gonna try to troll and try to make themselves known behind a computer screen and saying, well, maybe you don't know what you're talking about, or maybe you don't have those skills. I mean, I'm sure you deal with that every single day. What are some of the ways you combat that and your experiences and unfortunately having to do so?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that unfortunately you just kind of get used to and you grow some thick skin. You deal with it since middle school, high school. As soon as you're interested in sports, somebody's sitting there and saying like, well, who's the 4th string quarterback of this D3 school in the middle of nowhere? And I mean, they don't even know the answer to that. So kind of being realistic about it. Sometimes it's just people trying to prove a point that doesn't need an answer. The other thing is there are so many women in sports. So surrounding yourself with, or at least myself, with other strong women, and you have people to fall back on and, sometimes just kind of complain and get it out of your system. But you really realize that you are, kind of on the better side of the situation and that you're really fortunate to be working in sports. And if, that is, one of the downfalls for right now, it's worth it in the long run because again, we have such a cool industry and cool job and role and everything. So the comments, you just kind of get used to them or you ignore them. Sometimes I'll respond with some witty stuff, but I got to be a little bit careful because they'll all jump on the hate bandwagon, but it's fun. And the other thing is I just know when I'm around other people with really high sports IQs that, they agree with me or we can have really high level conversations. And that kind of helps validate me, at least internally, that I'm like, no, I do know. So I don't really have to listen to the trolls because I'm confident in that I know what I'm doing and, my IQ of sports.
When it comes to responding, definitely slippery slope because you know all these players, right? The ones you guys are talking about, you have to see them again. You're going to talk to me. And all these trolls are never going to see them again. I've probably been to a handful of games, maybe tops, right? They only know the game through what they hear maybe on TV or what maybe they see on Twitter. So definitely a much different viewpoint of the way you're watching it, and it's laughable, right, that someone would even take that stance.
Yeah, no, and that's the other thing is you just have to take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes you have to remember that they're never going to be in the position to meet their favorite player or stuff like that. And that can make people a little salty. So it is what it is.
So of course, talking about maybe just social media and maybe all the negatives that maybe come along with it. Obviously, with all the positives, there are going to be some negatives like the trolls, like the haters. But of course, there's also a lot of fake stuff that's just going on there, whether it's with followers, whether it's just with the perspective of social media. Well, how do you kind of combat that? Because I'm sure you see it everywhere in your line of work and making sure to get through it.
Yeah, a huge part of, success in a brand or even just an individual is authenticity, which is why it's so important to me. And so I think obviously not everyone is going to share every little aspect of their life or be a completely open book. But I think the parts that you do share, being genuine about it, being authentic as either, it could be a team, it could be a player, a business, really anything. I think really just helps connect fans that much closer and, bring them closer through that screen so that it's not just, a bunch of over calculated marketing, and having a lot of organic and genuine content, I think really, not only makes social media a better place to be, as a fan or just a follower, but I think it also helps with brands and being open and pure about what they're posting. I think it's good for everyone.
That's the biggest thing. I know the Slate House is doing a lot of that. So definitely going to be keeping up with that and watching all the stuff that's going on there. But there's so many other women that have to go through this stuff, but that also in the same position as you, right? Doing all these cool things. Last time we spoke a lot about maybe your mentors and people maybe in their 30s and 40s they looked up to. But I keep on seeing, right, you're posting with all your friends, right? Also in your mid 20s, doing all these cool things. Like who are some, like you guys kind of have like this kind of dream team of whatever it might be. Who are these people? What do they do? And like, how do you guys all work together to kind of advance the dream and what you guys are all doing?
So yeah, I actually, there's a ton of people that I look up to, of course, but the huge part of it is that this industry is constantly changing. So it's surrounding yourselves with people at the same level or, that are coming into it at the same point. And so for me, I have a bunch of friends that a couple, they work in branding and management, more specifically with like getting sponsorships and getting endorsements and brand deals like that. They work with both athletes and like entertainment influencers, projects like those. And that's really cool because you get to see kind of the behind the scenes of like, oh, it's not just, a player wearing a specific like tech fleece today. It's like that was all arranged and there was a lot of work that went into it and stuff. And that's not really stuff that I typically touch on too much. So it's exciting to see them do. A lot of my real good friends are also photographers. So they're out at the practices or games, courtside, getting all these great photos. It's cool to watch their styles change, or if they switch over sports, getting different video content, those different things. It's really cool because it's also one, motivational because all these roles require a lot of hustle, but then it's also inspirational because it kind of influences your creativity and you're like, oh, they did this really cool project. I'm going to go, put my heart into this project and show my creativity too. So I think definitely surrounding myself with not only, good mentorship, but peers has been really crucial in, just navigating through sports.
So huge in maybe lighting that path up and kind of doing it all, maybe it just hand in hand and building each other up, right? Instead of maybe seeing it as a competition, right? Where you guys are all kind of doing this together, like as a team, which is great. But pivoting over to maybe, because this is WNBA Wednesdays, thinking about maybe the league and where the league is going. Obviously, maybe working the league for the last few years in several different roles, or just obviously seeing it from the outside looking in. Where do you kind of see this league going right at 25th season? Everyone's talking about it. This year is obviously a really big year for the league, and where do you kind of see things going?
Yeah, you can only go up really. And I think it's constantly growing. They're doing huge things, big partnerships with like Nike and Wilson, and trying to get a lot of, more exposure on the league. There's, I think, twice or, just a significantly larger number of nationally broadcast games this upcoming season. The schedules are competitive. There's a lot of big stars in the league, and then they're doing a good job of maintaining that momentum in the off season. So these players go overseas and play, throughout Europe and different places, and showcasing that film and those players getting championships. So I think really just maintaining this momentum. And I think anyone that might not watch the WNBA or just women's basketball, if you just sit down and watch a game, you might actually really get in. You'd be surprised like how easy it is to get into it, because I didn't play basketball. So I was really just a fan going into it. And women's basketball just has the fundamentals. It has the speed. Like there's just so much going on that, yeah, if you're looking for like posterizing dunks, you might be a little disappointed, but like, that's really not even happening every single play in the NBA either. So I think if you go into it with, the expectations of you're watching almost a different sport because they hoop totally different, and it's just so cool to watch, that, that'll really help grow the sport and continue to, get girls in the sport as well. Because I feel like a lot of fans come from people that just have touched basketball at some point in their life.
You brought up an interesting point, because that's probably the biggest thing, whether it's in the comments or just in just people talk about the WNBA in terms of why they don't watch, would be, well, they can't dunk, or they can't do this, or they can't do that. And it's all this negativity that surrounds it. What would your response be to that when someone asks you that, and just to try to light them and say, well, if you look at it from this perspective, it's a great game to watch?
Yeah, I mean, like if you go into anything and you're constantly comparing it, you're going to be disappointed. So, you don't go into soccer and you're like, well, why are they, not hitting off the crossbar every single time? Or baseball, why isn't every play a home run? Like, yeah, it's going to be disappointing. The games are going to feel slow. Like you're not going to like it. But if you go into it and you just like have a fresh mind and you're, not going in with a lot of judgment and start to look at the sport for what it authentically is, you'll have your own appreciation for, women's basketball. It's different, they play different, the style is different, and it's not better or worse. It's just, you cannot sit here and compare it to the NBA or to, college men's basketball or your pickup league at LA Fitness. It's not going to be the same. And their talent is so high that, you will be amazed at just how phenomenal these women are at playing basketball.
Definitely. It's definitely just all it takes is really having an open mind and looking at it through a non-biased perspective and saying, you know what, let me just see what this is all about. And trust me, if you watch 5 minutes, you'll get a much greater appreciation to everyone out there that just won't give it a shot. And one thing, right, you mentioned all the partnerships that WNBA has. I did think of all the new Nike jerseys, and they've kind of dominated Twitter for a few days. Which one's your favorite?
I mean, I'm biased, so I definitely like the Connecticut Sun. Theirs just tells such a really good story in their involvement with the Mohegan Sun tribe. All of the very small details that went into it, not like a single aspect was overlooked. They even have one of the jerseys is like in the native like language and like says stuff that like represents Mohegan Sun. So I think that's really cool. I thought the Indiana Fever did a really cool job. There's really kind of incorporated more pop culture and brought in some of the Stranger Things aspects and played off of that. So I think just in general, though, the whole release, the coordination that went with Nike and the WNBA and all the teams was really well done. And I think continuing to do stuff at such a high quality like that will only help grow the game even more because you might not be a fan of basketball at all, but people like cool looking stuff and exciting, stories. So I think continuing to like really put a lot of effort into that is going to be super good for the game.
Oh yeah, as long as there's more merch like this, it'll definitely keep me watching there. But Jay Slate, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was obviously a great one, and we've been talking about this part 2 forever. We finally got it done, and I'm so excited that it came out so great in this convo about women's hoops, what you're doing, really a bunch of great stuff. So thanks so much for coming on, and can't wait to talk again soon.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.